Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to China Showtime. Venezuela proposed to use an island to repay the $50 billion debt owed to China. It sounded like a very attractive deal, but China rejected the deal. Let's find out what's going on here. When it comes to the richest country in the world, some people think it is the United States, because many Americans are really very rich. But some people think that Saudi Arabia is the richest country in the world, because Saudi Arabia has too much oil resources. In 2019, Saudi Aramco became the company with the highest market value in the world, with a market value of more than $1.7 trillion, which shows how profitable oil is. It stands to reason that countries with rich oil reserves are richer. But there is such a country with huge oil reserves, but the people of this country are hungry, and it is even considered the poorest country in the world. This country is Venezuela. Venezuela has a lot of oil. In the last century, oil prices have remained high. Venezuela has earned huge economic benefits through oil exports. With strong financial support by oil exports, the Venezuelan government provided very good social welfare to its citizens. These welfare include free house, free medical care, free education, free gasoline, and even wages without working. These welfare once reached the highest level in the world. At that time, the living level of Venezuelan people was extremely high, even comparable to that of the United States. However, due to Venezuela's radical nationalization of the domestic oil industry, Western oil companies gradually withdrew from Venezuela, and due to major differences with the United States on political and economic issues, the United States began to sanction Venezuela since the last century. Sanctions have been imposed on important industries such as oil and financial. Under the sanctions of the United States, Venezuela's oil extraction technology has been stagnant in the last century. It is also impossible to use the world's most advanced oil extraction technology in oil fields, like the Gulf countries. This means that the cost of oil extraction in Venezuela is very high, and it cannot produce high-quality oil products that meet domestic demand. At the beginning of the 21st century, international oil prices plummeted and even fell to the lowest price in history. At that time, Venezuela's economic income was mainly dependent on oil exports. After the sharp drop in oil prices, Venezuela's income from oil exports could not even cover the cost of oil extraction. During the oil price crisis, Venezuela's economy was on the verge of collapse. When oil prices plummeted, Venezuela fell into the most difficult economic period. The Venezuelan government implemented inappropriate economic policies. Due to the loss of a large amount of oil export revenue, it is impossible to continue to import a large amount of needed materials by the people's lives. The shelves in supermarkets have become empty, and it is difficult for people to buy even the most basic daily necessities. In order to alleviate the domestic economic pressure, the Venezuelan government has issued large-scale currency indiscriminately. Actions not only did not alleviate the economic pressure, but instead triggered inflation and made the economic crisis worse. In the case of a severe economic crisis, the Venezuelan government can only borrow from foreign countries, hoping to alleviate the country's economic crisis. However, many countries do not recognize Venezuela's ability to repay debts. They are worried that their money will never be returned, and refuse to lend money to Venezuela. According to relevant statistics, by the end of September 2013, Venezuela had borrowed more than $110 billion, of which China had lent Venezuela $50 billion, almost half of its foreign debt. However, such a large amount of money cannot reverse Venezuela's economic difficulties, and in the end it was unable to repay this large foreign debt. In the face of extreme economic difficulties, the Venezuelans are still willing to repay the loan, and faced with a huge debt that is difficult to repay, the Venezuelans have proposed a crazy deal. They are willing to transfer an island in the Caribbean Sea to China to repay the loan obtained from China. The island is called Blanquer Island, located in the southern Caribbean Sea, with an area of 64 square kilometers. It is comparable in size to Manhattan in New York. As soon as this proposal was made public, it caused an uproar internationally. The Americans were very angry when they heard the news. For hundreds of years, the United States has regarded the entire Americas as its backyard. Any foreign forces entering the Caribbean Sea will cause strong reactions from the United States, such as the Cuban Missile Crisis in the last century. If China gets an island in the Caribbean, it will be a game changer for Latin America. In order to oppose the deal, the United States has threatened to escalate sanctions on Venezuela and even use force to stop the deal. Considering that the Caribbean Sea is on America's doorstep, no one would think that the U.S. threat was just a joke. This deal seems very attractive to China. Obtaining a tropical island in the remote Caribbean Sea is not just as simple as owning a resort. Owning this island means that China also become a Caribbean country. Participating in the handling of various affairs in the Caribbean will be of great help to China in expanding its influence in the Caribbean. Moreover, Blanquer Island is very close to the United States. It is only 3,000 kilometers from here to Washington, D.C. If China builds a military base on this island, it will really make Americans sleepless. This is really crazy. Americans are building their military bases all over the world in the name of maintaining world order. In fact, they are trying to maintain the global hegemony of the United States and force weak countries to submit to the United States. If a competitor's military base appears on the doorstep of the United States, we can imagine how angry the United States will be, and even start a world war. China chose to reject this deal because it was too crazy, for several reasons. The first reason, of course, is that the location of this island is too sensitive, which makes the Americans very uncomfortable. China is only pursuing its own development and does not want to conflict with the United States. It is completely opposite to the United States' practice of creating conflicts to prevent other countries from developing. The second reason is that the practice of ceding land to repay debts is too similar to the colonists hundreds of years ago. China does not want to be established as a colonizer in Latin America. The third reason, which is also the most important, is that China believes that economic cooperation with Venezuela should be long-term, healthy, and win-win, rather than unilateral plunder. To this end, China and Venezuela have signed a new cooperation agreement. China will continue to provide loans to Venezuela, and Venezuela will continue to export oil to China for a long time to repay the debt, because one day the price of oil will return to a high level, when China profit from it. China will also strengthen cooperation with Venezuela in more aspects, to help Venezuela get out of economic difficulties as soon as possible. Every one of us is very aware of what is happening now. 2022 has a lot of major events. Oil prices are back to high levels, and both China and Venezuela have benefited from long-term economic cooperation. But the United States has fallen into an economic crisis, and President Biden even took the initiative to seek help from Venezuela. It's really incredible. We have to marvel at how fast the world is changing.